August 19, 1944, Wehrmacht Headquarters, East Prussia General Oberst. Alfred Jodl examined the latest intelligence from the collapsing Western Front. His analysts had mapped the Allied supply lines, now stretched over 400 miles from the Normandy beaches to General Patton's fast-moving Third Army. The conclusion seemed obvious. The Americans had outpaced their logistics. Patton would soon have to stop, perhaps within days, maybe even hours. No army could advance indefinitely without fuel. From his position at Hitler's Wolfschanze headquarters, Jodl understood what every experienced German commander knew. An armored division advancing in combat consumed nearly 150,000 gallons of fuel each day. With Patton's spearhead now 400 miles from its main depots, Jodl's calculations appeared irrefutable. The Third Army would soon run dry, giving the Wehrmacht a chance to regroup along the Seine and possibly hold until winter. What Jodl didn't know, however, was that just 125 miles away, nearly 6,000 trucks were already thundering east in an unbroken convoy, headlights blazing through the night in open defiance of standard military procedure. These trucks carried 12,500 tons of vital supplies every 24 hours. This was the Red Ball Express, a logistics operation so daring that no German strategist had ever imagined it possible. Within 72 hours, Patton's immobilized tanks would smash through German positions along the Seine. Within a week, Paris would be liberated. Within a month, the Americans would stand at Germany's doorstep. The finest military minds of the Wehrmacht were about to receive a lesson in logistics that would redefine modern warfare, delivered by 23,000 truck drivers, 3/4 of them African-American soldiers, who turned a one-way highway system into the most efficient military supply route in history. The German General Staff's confidence in American failure was rooted in both experience and logic. They had invented blitzkrieg, revolutionized combined arms warfare, and understood better than anyone the limits imposed by logistics. Time and again, their own offensives had stalled, not because of enemy resistance, but because their supply systems couldn't keep up. In Russia, the German advance had faltered when logistics collapsed. Trucks broke down on muddy roads, while horse-drawn wagons, still 80% of the Wehrmacht's transport, lagged far behind the armored spearheads. Differing railway gauges caused supply stockpiles to pile up hundreds of miles from the front. General der Panzertruppen Heinrich von Luttwitz, who would later command the 47th Panzer Corps, wrote in July, "The Americans face the same logistical impossibility we faced in Russia. Their mechanization will be their downfall. Machines require fuel, ammunition, and parts. They've advanced 400 miles in 30 days. History tells us what comes next. Paralysis." German intelligence tracked American consumption with precision. A single Sherman tank used half a mile per gallon on roads, far worse off-road. An infantry division needed 700 tons of supplies daily. An armored division, nearly 1,000. Patton commanded 12 divisions across a 60-mile front. The math was inescapable, 12,000 tons a day, hauled 400 miles across ruined roads and shattered bridges. General Major Siegfried Westphal, who would soon serve as Chief of Staff to Field Marshal von Rundstedt, made the calculation on August 20th. Even if the Americans had unlimited trucks, which they don't, and flawless roads, which they don't, and no breakdowns, which is impossible, they still couldn't maintain this advance beyond 48 hours. Physical limits apply to everyone, even American industry, but on August 25, 1944, at 2:00 p.m., in a requisitioned French chateau near Le Mans, Lieutenant Colonel Lauren Ayres of the Motor Transport Service faced a room of doubtful officers. The math was grim. Patton's army was consuming supplies faster than any force in history, advancing at a pace no logistical system had ever supported. Conventional methods, railways, scheduled convoys, depot-to-depot chains had collapsed under the strain. "Gentlemen," Ayres announced, "we're going to build a one-way highway from Cherbourg and the beaches straight to the front. Every vehicle will run 20 hours a day, no stops except for refueling or emergencies. Our minimum daily goal, 12,500 tons. The name came from railroad terminology. A Red Ball freight was an express shipment given absolute priority. The Red Ball Express would operate under the same rule, no delays, no exceptions. Its design broke every rule of German military doctrine: 2 parallel one-way routes, one for loaded trucks heading east, one for empties returning west. Headlights would stay on through the night, abandoning blackout procedures. Convoys departed at 5-minute intervals, maintaining 35 miles per hour. With mobile repair teams stationed every 50 miles and military police removing any vehicle that dropped below 25, Colonel Charles O. Thrasher, head of the advanced section of the communications zone, reviewed the numbers. We'll need 140 truck companies, 5,958 vehicles operating at 90% readiness. Every logistics manual says that's impossible. Yet within 36 hours, the impossible became reality. On August 26, 1944, drivers from the 39 16th Quartermaster Truck Company climbed into their GMC, CCKW2 1-2-ton trucks, nicknamed Deuce and a Halves, loaded with 105mm shells bound for Patton's guns near Melun, 300 miles east. The makeup of the Red Ball Express would have shocked Nazi racial theorists. Of the 23,000 drivers who kept it running, roughly 75% were African-American soldiers serving in a segregated army. Men who could not eat in white-only restaurants back home were now powering the advance of America's most celebrated general. They quickly built their own identity. Trucks bore painted slogans: Patton's Blood Bank, Hitler, Here We Come, and Detroit to Berlin Express. They enforced their own rules. Slower trucks pulled over, broken ones were pushed into ditches, and any vehicle under 20 mph was treated as a road hazard. By August 28th, German reconnaissance began reporting the unimaginable. Units from Aufklärung 116 radioed from positions overlooking the route. Continuous vehicle column, headlights visible for 20 kilometers. No spacing. Estimate 1,000 vehicles per hour. Americans ignore all tactical discipline. To German commanders, this was madness. Headlights invited air attack. Continuous convoys made perfect artillery targets. Lack of spacing risked catastrophic pileups. Yet the Americans pressed on, seemingly unfazed. General Lieutenant Edgar Feuchtinger, commanding the 21st Panzer Division, watched from concealed positions on August 30th. His report to Army Group B revealed growing alarm. The enemy operates a supply system beyond comprehension. Vehicles pass every 30 seconds day and night without pause. They do not conceal, disperse, or follow any rules we know. This is not military science. It is mass production turned into warfare. What the Germans couldn't grasp was that American logistics followed entirely different logic. Where they prized concealment, the Americans relied on volume. Where they conserved vehicles, the Americans assumed high failure rates and planned replacements. Where they enforced rigid procedures, the Americans adapted constantly. The Red Ball Express achieved numbers that shattered German expectations. Between August 25th and 31st, 1944, it delivered 89,739 tons of supplies, an average of 12,148 tons per day. Each round trip covered 686 miles, with nearly 6,000 trucks averaging 1.5 runs daily, burning 300,000 gallons of fuel in the process. When German intelligence captured these figures, they dismissed them as Allied propaganda. But the numbers were real and growing. By September 5th, the Red Ball Express had become the backbone of the Allied advance across France. The Allied supply system had achieved a rhythm that baffled German logistics officers, who still depended on horse-drawn wagons for nearly 80% of their transport. From the western terminus, convoys departed every 5 minutes, each averaging 67 vehicles. Standard loads reached 5 tons per truck, often stretching to 7 under overload. Covering the 350-mile journey took around 14 hours each way, with only a 2-hour turnaround at either end. At any given time, roughly 5,000 vehicles were in constant motion. The Red Ball Express became a hub of constant innovation, as drivers and mechanics tackled challenges that German military experts had deemed impossible. When breakdowns occurred, about 1 in 800 per day, mobile maintenance teams repaired trucks directly on the roadside. They followed a triage method. If repairs couldn't be completed within 15 minutes, the vehicle was moved aside. Mechanics salvaged parts from unrepairable trucks and even swapped engines in as little as 45 minutes using mobile cranes. When congestion slowed the designated Red Ball route, drivers quickly created alternate paths. They requisitioned French buses to transport personnel, freeing trucks for cargo, and even captured German vehicles, repainting them in olive drab to integrate them into the fleet. In places where bridges were destroyed, they built bypasses using rubble from bombed buildings as makeshift roadbeds. The Germans, observing what appeared to be organized chaos, were unable to comprehend how such a disordered system could succeed. Their own logistics doctrine focused on strict planning, maintenance schedules, and adherence to regulations. The Americans seemed to ignore every rule, yet their efficiency only increased. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect for German observers was American fuel logistics. The Red Ball Express consumed over 300,000 gallons of gasoline daily, just for its own operation, more fuel than some entire German armies received. Despite this, American fuel supplies never ran dry. Behind this success was another innovation, Operation Pluto, which laid underwater pipelines across the English Channel. By September 1944, fuel was flowing through these hidden pipelines, undetected by German intelligence. Along the Red Ball route, fuel depots were set up every 25 miles, and tanker trucks operated their own convoys to ensure no vehicle waited more than 10 minutes for refueling. Major General Walter Warlimont noted from aerial photographs that American fuel dumps appeared larger than Germany's entire strategic reserves. "They burn more gasoline moving gasoline," he remarked, "than we allocate to whole panzer divisions." This isn't war as we know it. It's industrial overflow. The Red Ball Express didn't just sustain Patton's advance, it accelerated it dramatically. German doctrine estimated that armored divisions could advance 20 to 30 miles per day under ideal conditions. But with the Red Ball Express, Patton's forces were moving 40 to 60 miles daily for weeks. On September 1, 1944, the 4th Armored Division advanced 35 miles in the morning, paused at noon for refueling, where Red Ball trucks were already waiting, and continued another 32 miles that afternoon. This single-day 67-mile advance shattered German assumptions, which capped possible progress at 30 miles per day. General Heinz Guderian, upon reviewing these reports in East Prussia, initially dismissed them as exaggerated. "No armored force can advance 60 miles daily for a week," he argued. "Mechanical failure alone would prevent it. This must be propaganda or a reporting error." But intercepted American radio transmissions confirmed the reports. Even more alarming to the Germans was that the Americans weren't encrypting their communications, broadcasting their positions openly, confident they could move faster than any German counteraction. By September 5, 1944, German intelligence had compiled detailed analyses of the Red Ball Express. The findings were devastating for Wehrmacht strategists. Every prior assumption about American logistics and operational speed had to be rewritten. What they witnessed defied their entire understanding of modern warfare. German military analysts viewed American logistics with a mix of disbelief and frustration. They saw the U.S. Army abandoning damaged vehicles instead of repairing them, wasting trucks and equipment that any European force would have salvaged. Drivers operated for days on stimulants, ignoring every rule of human endurance and personnel management. Camouflage was minimal, exposing convoys to air attack, though those attacks rarely came. Mechanical failures affected nearly 30% of vehicles daily, yet the system kept moving through sheer redundancy. Fuel use was astronomical, enough to bankrupt any European military. Field Marshal Walter Model's reaction reflected deep concern. "If these reports are true," he remarked, "we're facing not just a superior army but a superior civilization. They waste resources because they have endless resources. They don't hide because they don't fear us. We cannot counter this with tactics alone." But behind that overwhelming efficiency lay a human cost the Germans couldn't see. Red Ball Express drivers endured physical and mental strain, often operating for 72 consecutive hours. Exhaustion and stimulant use caused hallucinations, and hundreds lost their lives to accidents, collisions in fog, rollovers on broken roads, and fires from overheated engines. Despite it all, morale stayed remarkably high. Most of these drivers were African Americans, men denied full rights at home, but determined to prove their worth abroad. Every mile they drove, every load they delivered, challenged Hitler's racist ideology. Captured German officers would later confirm how deeply the Red Ball Express affected morale on their side. Colonel Hans von Luck, captured in September 1944, told his interrogators, "We realized the war was lost when we saw your logistics. You defy every rule, wasting fuel, abandoning vehicles, pushing drivers beyond reason, yet you win through sheer volume. You've turned warfare into industrial output." The psychological effect on German troops was immense. Night after night they heard the constant roar of American trucks. The sound itself became a form of psychological warfare. While German infantry often had only 3 bullets per rifle, Americans brought endless supplies. The trucks themselves were technological marvels. The GMC CCKW2, 1 2-ton truck, the backbone of the Red Ball Express, was mass production at its finest. By the end of the war, General Motors had built over 500,000 of them, more trucks than Germany possessed in total. They included features unheard of in German vehicles: all-wheel drive as standard, automatic tire inflation, waterproofing for deep river crossings, engines that ran on poor quality fuel, and heaters that actually worked in winter. The American approach to maintenance was equally revolutionary. Where Germans rebuilt engines, Americans simply replaced them. Where Germans rationed parts, Americans discarded entire vehicles over minor issues. Instead of a few master mechanics, the U.S. Army fielded thousands of competent technicians who could handle most repairs. As Allied forces advanced eastward, the Red Ball Express showed adaptability that stunned German planners. When the main route to Chartres became overloaded, new routes were created overnight: the White Ball Express from Rouen to Paris, Green Diamond from Cherbourg to rail depots, Red Lion from Bayeux to Brussels, and ABC from Antwerp to Charleroi. Each became operational within 48 hours, a process that would have taken German staff weeks. Americans simply painted new signs, assigned trucks, and kept moving. The racial makeup of the Red Ball Express baffled Nazi theorists. German ideology claimed black soldiers were incapable of technical work or leadership. Yet, African-American drivers were accomplishing logistical feats the Wehrmacht couldn't match. They were fully aware of the irony, driving harder to prove Hitler wrong, defeating racism through skill and performance. German prisoners forced to help load Red Ball trucks were shocked. They worked under African-American sergeants who calculated loads faster than their own engineers, spoke better English than their teachers, and treated them with fairness, despite Nazi propaganda. The infrastructure behind the Red Ball Express was equally astonishing. Engineers built or repaired 40 bridges, set up 15 fuel depots, 26 maintenance stations, and 8 temporary driver camps, all while the operation continued. When Germans destroyed the bridge at Mantes to cut supply lines, they predicted it would take 6 weeks to rebuild. American engineers built a temporary bridge in just 14 hours, detouring convoys for only a few miles. German observers were astonished. No long planning sessions, no blueprints, just immediate construction. Americans built faster than Germans could destroy, creating supply routes and facilities that appeared overnight across. France saw one achievement particularly shocked German artillery. Officers, the Americans' ammunition supply, U.S. artillery. Units fired without restraint, something German gunners hadn't done since 1942. During the Siege of Metz in September 1944, U.S. forces fired 100,000 shells in 24 hours, and the Red Ball Express delivered every round, plus a 20% reserve. Meanwhile, German guns were limited to 50 shells per day. The difference was devastating. American guns fired continuously while Germans calculated that such bombardments would need 50 truckloads of ammo per hour. The Red Ball delivered them without pause. By late September, the cost of such intensity became clear. Vehicle losses reached staggering levels. Mechanical wear so extreme that the average truck lifespan fell to just 10,000 miles. During the massive Allied advance in 1944, the Red Ball Express became the backbone of American logistics in Europe. Despite enormous daily losses, thousands of destroyed or abandoned vehicles, hundreds of engines replaced each week, and tens of thousands of tires consumed, the operation never slowed. American industry had foreseen such attrition and maintained an uninterrupted flow of replacements. Ships docked weekly at French ports, unloading hundreds of new trucks, while freshly trained drivers, prepared in just 2 days, were immediately dispatched into convoys. German intelligence was stunned, reporting that the Americans destroyed more vehicles each week than Germany even possessed in France, yet their transport capacity continued to grow. They had achieved something German planners believed impossible, a supply chain faster than consumption itself. Along the Red Ball routes, French civilians observed the astonishing abundance of American resources, a stark contrast to the deprivation they had endured under German occupation. The psychological impact was immediate. The generosity of the predominantly African-American Red Ball drivers, who often shared food, chocolate, and soap with local children despite regulations, deeply impressed the population. German intelligence soon reported that French morale had shifted entirely. Most now believed an American victory inevitable, citing the endless convoys as living proof. Resistance activities along the routes surged by 400%, as once passive civilians began actively aiding Allied efforts. In early September 1944, the Red Ball Express faced its toughest test when Patton's Third Army advanced so far that even the tireless supply convoys struggled to keep pace. Round trips stretched beyond 700 miles, drivers were collapsing from exhaustion, and vehicles were wearing out faster than they could be repaired. German intelligence detected the strain and optimistically concluded that American supply lines were nearing collapse. Yet within just 72 hours, the Americans reorganized the entire system, creating intermediate transfer points to halve route distances, rotating drivers to prevent fatigue, establishing forward maintenance depots, and doubling the fleet size. By September 12th, delivery volumes had actually increased. What should have crippled the operation instead made it stronger. Soon, the Americans expanded their logistics innovation with an entirely new strategy the Germans had considered impossible: large-scale aerial resupply. Fleets of C-47 transport aircraft began delivering critical materials directly to frontline units, each plane carrying 3 tons of supplies. On September 16, 1944, German observers recorded an astonishing 900 transport flights in a single day, delivering 2,700 tons by air, far surpassing the Luftwaffe's own maximum efforts at Stalingrad, which had barely reached 300 tons daily. The Americans treated their transport aircraft as airborne trucks, unconcerned about escort or fuel shortages. They simply absorbed losses through overwhelming numbers, an arithmetic the Wehrmacht could never match. In 1994, during the 50th anniversary of D-Day, the United States Postal Service released a commemorative stamp honoring the Red Ball Express at the National Postal Museum in Washington, D.C. The ceremony recognized an operation often overshadowed by the battles themselves, yet equally vital to the Allied victory. Veterans who attended spoke with pride about a mission that demonstrated how American industry and individual resolve could overcome any obstacle. These drivers pushed through exhaustion, mechanical failures, and harsh weather that even stopped tanks. Most were black soldiers, serving in segregated units, discriminated against, and denied recognition during the war. Yet they delivered victory, 1 mile at a time at 35 minutes. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is not secondary support, it is the main effort. The operation showed that a democratic nation could mobilize resources on a scale unmatched by totalitarian regimes. German generals who once mocked American logistics was silenced by 6,000 trucks moving, 12,500 tons of supplies, daily across 700 miles of liberated France. The Germans had expected Americans to advance cautiously, conserving resources as European armies traditionally did. Instead, the U.S. created a logistical flood that drowned German defenses in an overwhelming tide of supplies. The success of the Red Ball Express wasn't due to military genius, but to qualities the Germans never understood: industrial power, mechanical skill, improvisation, and individual initiative. Where the German army required approval from high command for every move, American soldiers made critical decisions independently. General George S. Patton, whose Third Army relied heavily on the Red Ball Express, later wrote the ultimate tribute in his memoirs. The truck drivers of the Red Ball Express deserve as much credit for the defeat of Germany as any combat unit. They drove through exhaustion, mechanical failure, and weather that stopped armor. Without them, the Third Army doesn't move. Without movement, we don't win. They were mostly black soldiers, segregated, underestimated, and unacknowledged. Yet they fought and won as surely as any rifleman. That truth remains the enduring legacy of the Red Ball Express. Some 23,000 mostly African-American drivers, operating 6,000 trucks, turned a one-way supply route into a highway to victory. They achieved what German science claimed impossible, sustaining advancing armies faster than logic or endurance should allow. They proved that in modern warfare, the side with the most trucks can outlast the side with the best tactics. German officers who once mocked American logistics as wasteful and unsustainable found themselves surrendering 82 days later to armies fully supplied by those same trucks. In that moment, they finally understood. American trucks had defeated German tanks. Industrial strength had overwhelmed military precision. Logistics had become strategy. The Red Ball Express ended on November 16, 1944, but its lessons reshaped military thinking forever. In the industrial era, victory belonged not to the bravest soldier or the sharpest general, but to the nation that could deliver supplies the fastest and farthest. The German generals who sneered at American logistics in August 1944 signed surrender documents in May 1945, defeated by 23,000 truck drivers who revolutionized warfare at 35 mph. Their operation deserves its place among the greatest in history, and not for elegance or efficiency, but for sheer effectiveness. The Red Ball Express kept Patton's forces advancing, forced German retreats, and proved that in modern conflict, a convoy of trucks can matter more than a column of tanks. Even today, the highways of France bear traces of their passage: ruts from overloaded vehicles, bridges hastily rebuilt, and roadsides lined with abandoned trucks. But the true monument to their work is the speed of Allied victory. Each day the war shortened, saved thousands of lives, and the Red Ball Express shortened it by months. In the end, the German generals who mocked American logistics learned the hardest lesson of all. Amateurs discuss tactics, professionals discuss logistics, and Americans? They talked trucks. The roar of 6,000 engines carried both democracy and destruction down a one-way road to victory. The final word belongs to an anonymous German officer, remembered through a Red Ball driver's story at the 1994 commemoration. Standing by a Belgian road as convoys thundered past, the officer said in accented English, "We prepared for everything, your tanks, your planes, your ships, but we never prepared for your trucks. How do you fight an enemy with more trucks than you have soldiers?" The answer rolled past him every 5 minutes. Exhausted American drivers, rewriting the rules of warfare, one delivery at a time. The Red Ball Express had transformed logistics into strategy, supply into victory, and trucks into the most decisive weapon of the European war. By the time the laughter stopped, Patton's army was already at their gates, powered by the greatest logistics operation in military history.